Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include Exilecon kicking off this week and the exciting reveals of Path of Exile 2, plus the exciting reveal of the new Path of Exile 1 expansion. We've also got this week a Diablo 4 Battle Pass controversy, and a couple other stories that we'll highlight. But before we move on, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. Kicking things off with some Diablo 4 news. Blizzard has issued a warning about third-party software. In a post, Pez Radar highlighted that in the EULA, it explicitly prohibits any kind of cheating bots, hacks, or anything that automates, modifies, or otherwise interferes with the game. And he specifically called out TurboHUD 4. If you install this kind of software, it'll put your account at risk for permaban. Now, I'm not familiar with TurboHUD 4 specifically, but I know that TurboHUD in Diablo 3 was basically a super map hack kind of application. It brought in some quality of life features that some players argued were necessary to play the game, but you can't argue that it also was a map hack. It gave you information that you could not otherwise get. I'm going to assume TurboHUD 4 is the same thing, but for Diablo 4. In other Diablo 4 news, a Battle Pass controversy has started to make headlines. Just to recap, Diablo 4 seasons are not pay to play. You don't need to spend any money to participate in a season. You don't have to spend any money to participate in the Battle Pass. There's a free track on the Battle Pass, but there's also a paid track. That's the track that includes cosmetics. Well, the free track also has some cosmetics, but the paid pass has only cosmetics on it. So you need to spend some amount of money to unlock that paid track of the Battle Pass, and part of the Battle Pass, in fact, includes some premium currency. To take a step back, what is a Battle Pass? A Battle Pass gives you some list of activities that you need to perform, some goals to achieve, and that progresses you along the Battle Pass. You have the duration of a season, 90 days, to complete all those steps to complete the Battle Pass. You don't have to, but if you want to get all the rewards, you do have to. As you progress along this track, you're getting more and more of the rewards, and some of those rewards include in-game currency. So some of the money that you're spending on the Battle Pass, you are getting back. Now, it's sort of become I don't know if it's fair to say an industry standard in the video game industry, but at least a number of games do this, where if you fully complete the Battle Pass, you get enough premium currency to pay for the next Battle Pass. This is generally considered a cool move by the devs. It's a nice reward for players who actually put the time into the game to complete all, whatever 80 hours or so that it takes to complete the Battle Pass. These will be your most dedicated players, and they're likely going to be willing to spend money regardless. So a Battle Pass costs 800 premium currency in Diablo 4, but you can only earn 666 premium currency by completing the Battle Pass. So that means you do not have enough currency to buy the next one, so you do have to spend money again next season if you want to buy the Battle Pass again. So that's hit number one, but then hit number two is that 666 currency. Not only is it not enough to buy the next Battle Pass, it's not enough to buy anything. So if a player purchases the Battle Pass and then puts in the 80 hours to complete it, they earn enough premium currency to get a discount on something in the shop. And I agree that the Battle Pass should give enough currency to buy the next Battle Pass. And I argue this from two different perspectives. One for a good guy perspective of just being nice to the community and rewarding to players. But, if that's not enough, if doing a good thing isn't enough, then from just a business perspective, I think it's the smarter move. If a player knows that they're not going to be able to earn enough money to get the next Battle Pass for free, they might not buy this Battle Pass. They might not play the season as much as they would have. They're thereby not going to expose themselves to the shop as much. They're not going to expose themselves to the game as much. They won't expose themselves to all the cosmetics as much. They'll be less likely to purchase other cosmetics versus a player who's going to buy that Battle Pass knowing, hey, if I put in 80 hours, if I play the duration of the season, or I put in a good amount of time into the season, I can earn my next Battle Pass for free. And again, then they're so invested into the game that they're more likely to spend money. And worst case scenario, if they don't spend money again, they're at least a committed player. Because not only do they earn their next Battle Pass, they're going to want to stick around for next season to spend what they just earned. Whereas if the amount that they earn is so little, they just won't bother. But that's just my opinion. If the target customer is just whales, then I guess none of that matters. Now, speaking of things that are expensive, during last week's campfire chat, we've had another one since then, more on that in a bit, Joe Pipora mentioned that it is expensive to add stash tabs into the game, and he didn't mean expensive from a monetary perspective. On Twitter, he clarified, quote, "When we say they are expensive, what we mean is that they create a lot of memory overhead. When you see another player in-game, you load them and their entire stash filled with all their items. This is what teams are working diligently to improve so that we can have more stash tabs as soon as possible." A lot of players reacted to this saying, this is absurd, why would you need to load everyone's stash tabs? And I've had a lot of people who are actually programmers and kind of know a bit more what they're talking about chime in with some reasons why this may be the case, why things ended up this way. I speak to this more in this video over here, in which I react to Asmongold's video on why he was quitting Diablo 4. It's my personal theory that this code base was just brought over from Diablo 3 because we had the same issue in Diablo 3. And that in itself might be a result of technical debt, where basically some solution was implemented at some point that was not the optimal solution, and they have a list of like 1,000 things that they need to get done, and there's always a priority list, and things that are deemed more important are pushed higher up, and things that are deemed less important are pushed further down, and so this just builds up and builds up over time. And this issue is just never really addressed because it's never a priority until it becomes a problem. Basically, it's something that only gets addressed when people complain en masse. Speaking of stash tabs and campfire chats, we had yesterday another campfire chat, which I think was actually their best campfire chat yet. We got confirmation that we're getting that additional stash tab. The patch notes for patch 1.1.1 are coming up on August 2nd, with a full release of the patch probably on August 8th. The stream was very informative. We got a lot of information, we got a lot of explanations, a lot of insight. A lot of positive changes are being made. I go through all the highlights in this video over here, but having marinated a little bit more on some of them, it's likely that this still won't shake up the current meta, but it should improve the situation, especially on the defensive side of things for sorcerers. But I look forward to seeing the finalized patch notes and what could be theory crafted from that. One thing I appreciate on the stream, in fact, was that the devs even referenced a Carbot video that's all about the glorious, glorious horse in Diablo 4. Do give that a watch if you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description. In some other quick game news, we learned that Mortal Kombat 1 will see Omni-Man and Homelander added to the game, and it is confirmed that Omni-Man from Invincible will be voiced by JK Simmons, who voices him in the show. By the way, when's Invincible Season 2 coming out? If you like The Boys, you'll probably like Invincible. And vice versa. They're thematically similar, as in there's sort of dark takes on superheroes. So it actually makes sense that both Omni-Man and Homelander, who are kind of the equivalent of each other in their respective shows, are both coming to Mortal Kombat. In other news, we got an Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon gameplay preview. Again, this game releases on August 25th on PlayStation, PC, and Xbox. And based on the gameplay, this 6th entry seems to be a return to form, to the original trilogy that was very beloved by its fanbase. The basic gameplay loop of these mech games is that you go on a mission, you get money, you customize your mech, and then you take it into another mission and repeat. In fact, the garage is such a significant feature that they are adding ray tracing into Armored Core 6, but just when you're in the garage. This is on PC, of course, and it's been confirmed that the game will have a 120 FPS option, which is, that's gotta be a first from Software, right? The company's not exactly known for its robust PC ports. Then in some Path of Exile news. Exilecon kicked off yesterday, is continuing today, but earlier in the week we actually got a patch for Path of Exile 1, which included engine improvements. It replaced PoE's particle system with PoE's 2 GPU-based system. This allows for more complex effects and offloads calculations to the GPU. Basically, they can do prettier things in a more optimized way. But now back to Exilecon and the exciting announcements that happened during the keynote presentation. So, Path of Exile 2. They revealed that way back in 2019. But since then, we've heard pretty much nothing. In the past month or two, we got a couple teasers that looked remarkable. They blew me away. The tightness of the gameplay was at like an order of magnitude higher than what I'd last seen. And seeing more gameplay footage of PoE 2, see more than just a trailer, see the actual live gameplay. One of the criticisms that I used to have about PoE is that the combat just felt a little janky. It wasn't as smooth as Diablo 3's combat. Just visually, I'll only know for sure when I play it myself, but just visually, it looks so smooth now. It looks like they're gunning for the best-in-class combat in the genre, which is a title that I previously reserved for Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. We'll talk a little bit more granularly about some of the things that we saw in a bit, but first off, another major, just crazy bomb that was dropped. PoE 2 will be a completely separate game from PoE 1, which I understand sounds actually completely normal and not like a bombshell if you're not coming from a background of knowing what's going on with PoE. But in 2019, they said that PoE 2 would effectively replace PoE 1, that it would just be like a giant expansion for PoE 1. So PoE 1 would cease to exist, it would just turn into PoE 2, you would not be able to go back and play PoE 1, it would just be this mega overhaul expansion. Now, they've decided, no, PoE 1 will continue to exist separately, PoE 2 will be its own thing, because they basically realized that they're just changing so much in PoE 2, and it's no longer feasible to just have it as an upgrade on the existing game. Now, this means that they're going to actually keep running both games in parallel, and they're going to continue to have expansions for PoE 1, even while PoE 2 exists. I thought, okay, maybe they'll just keep it as like a legacy mode, but no, they're going to continue to actively develop expansions for it, and they're going to try to have their seasonal cadence, their expansion cadence where the two don't overlap, so that an expansion for one releases midway through the expansion of the other. So every month and a half, basically, on that regular 3-month expansion cadence, you're going to have either a PoE 2 or a PoE 1 expansion, which means that if you're going to play both games, pretty much your entire time can now be taken up by PoE. You can live and exist entirely within a PoE ecosystem. More realistically, though, what I expect to happen is probably there's going to be some amount of people that are going to want to stick with PoE 1, that they just love the zoom, super fast-paced, obliterating screens of enemies playstyle that the endgame of PoE 1 has become. Some people came to the game during this phase of its life, right? PoE 1 did not start off blitzingly fast, but it evolved to that, and some people came to PoE when it already was that fast, so that is the game for them. They don't have any nostalgia for the slower-paced gameplay, and PoE 2 does seem to be dialing back the pace. That said, we're not seeing super high level endgame gameplay, but from everything that we hear from the design philosophies and what seems to be the developer intent, they do seem to want PoE 2 to be a more slow-paced, methodical, challenging game. Almost like a Souls-like ARPG. Not nearly that severe, but it's getting there. So now by having PoE 2 and PoE 1, well, the people that like the zoom stick with PoE 1, the people that want that more methodical, slower-paced game that it feels like the dev team really wants, they can go to PoE 2, and those that enjoy both are going to rotate between them. And they also clarified that any cosmetics purchased will transfer, any microtransactions will transfer, so stash tabs, cosmetics that can be transferred. For instance, there's like a druid class in PoE 2, there's no druid in PoE 1, so if you have some specific cosmetic for that, it won't transfer, but any cosmetic that can transfer will transfer. You don't have to buy it again. Now, another bombshell was that the closed beta date for PoE 2 is June 7th, 2024. This is a lot longer into the future than many of us thought, hoped, or expected. It's almost a year. That's for closed beta, so that means we could be looking at a final release potentially in 2025. That said, they said they don't want to rush the game, and honestly, given the extent of the upgrades that we've seen since 2019, it's understandable they've taken on a lot more work. Waiting to launch with a fully robust PoE 2 is absolutely the right move, and in the meantime, they're going to continue to support PoE 1 with expansions. And we got a really cool one as well coming up next, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's talk a bit more about some of the innovations being brought to PoE 2, some of the changes, some of the upgrades. So first off, weapon swap. Now, I'm going to start making parallels to Diablo 4. The Barbarian's Arsenal system, where you can assign a specific weapon to a specific skill. Well, now with weapon swap in PoE, basically every class will be able to do that. This is a huge upgrade and meaningful and important change to weapon swap. I love this change. In fact, just a couple months ago, I was having a talk with my friends about how weapon swap is a terrible feature in ARPGs because it's just not serving the purpose that it was designed to have, which is that you have, let's say, a ranged weapon and a melee weapon, and you swap to the right weapon for the right usage case, but no one uses it that way. Since the times of Diablo 2, it's all about, I swap to this just to do my battle orders, or I swap to this just to last hit with my Gull Dagger. It's just not good gameplay. So now to have it as just an automatic swap. You don't have to manually change. The skill is assigned to use whatever weapon that you assign to it. Great, great change. Dodge roll brought to PoE with no cooldown. This is a great change, and I think it's part of what makes the combat so fluid and dynamic. You're not going to be constantly dodge rolling because it doesn't make you move faster. You're also not attacking while you're using the dodge roll, so you're not incentivized to just be constantly dodging, but at least anytime you need to move out of an enemy effect, you have your dodge roll. It's not on cooldown, right? That's the problem we run into in Diablo 4. So I love that we got a dodge in Diablo 4 because you have to react to enemy mechanics. But what happens when you only have a couple charges of dodge and you have 80 enemies on screen, each doing their mechanics? Well, you just don't have enough dodges to dodge them all. Even if you use your dodges, the cooldown on your dodges as intelligently as you possibly can, you just eventually, the density is such that you cannot keep up. In general, the PoE devs don't like cooldowns. They try to limit them as much as possible. They still have some, but a lot fewer than in Diablo games. Now, in addition to the dodge roll, a lot of skills, especially melee skills, will have built-in movement mechanics. So, and basically, depending on where the enemy is when you activate the skill, that might determine its behavior. So, if you have a melee skill and you are some distance away from an enemy, then it might serve as a closer. It's going to move you further towards the enemy. Whereas if you're closer to the enemy, it's not going to have that same movement assigned to it. This all helps combat be a lot more fluid. PoE 2 is going to have 100 unique bosses. Basically every area, there's going to be 100 different areas, and each is going to have its own unique boss. PoE 2 has over 250 different skills, and a number of the skills in PoE 1, reserved mana. I'm trying to think of how to explain this. So, okay, auras. There are like sort of defensive buffs, defensive or offensive buffs, just kind of buffs in general that you can maintain on your character, and these reserve mana. So the cost of using one of these skills is, let's say, 10%, 50%, some amount of your mana is being reserved. So if you normally have 100 mana, now you only have, let's say, 50 to work with for your active ability. And so a lot of builds would stack as many of these reserve mana powers, leaving you with this tiny sliver of your mana pool, such that you can basically cast like a couple of your main attacks before you have to pop your mana flask. So, a cool mechanic, in theory, that in principle led to some kind of unpleasant builds, but in PoE 2, instead of these skills reserving mana, they're going to have their own separate resource entirely, which is a great change. Now it's called Spirit, and basically you have X amount of Spirit. You can choose to gain more Spirit, but how you allocate that Spirit between your reserve skills, that's going to be what you need to manage, as opposed to managing it as well with your mana and making your life more miserable and having to pop your flasks more. PoE 2 is also adding 6 new classes on top of the existing classes. There's going to be 36 total ascendancies. And they made a change to how crowd control mechanics work, like a freeze. It's now, instead of going to apply, especially against bosses, instead of just applying very, very short-term CCs, instead CCs all build up gradually. So if you freeze a boss, it's instead going to apply like a chill. And the more you apply of it, the stronger that effect becomes, until it eventually builds up to a full hard CC. And the same happens with stuns and immobilize as well. So overall, PoE 2 looking really exciting, but a year away. But in the meantime, August 18th is the release of the next Path of Exile expansion, Trial of the Ancestors. And they're basically bringing an auto-battler to PoE. I always love when they try their just crazy inventive ideas for leagues, for expansions. Are they always successful? No, some of their biggest, craziest ideas have been some of their biggest flops, but I still admire them for having the creativity, the inventiveness, the courage and audacity to try these crazy ideas and see if they stick. The new league mechanic has you participate in a best 2 out of 3 round tournament with a sort of auto-battle or MOBA-like combat. You select your team and the enemy team, because different opponents will have specific rewards that you'll be hunting for. If you win matches, you earn favor, which you can use to buy equipment and field items. If you win the entire tournament, then you'll get one of 4 exclusive uniques. And there's a variety of rewards that you can earn, including things called passive skill tattoos, which allow you to take a single passive skill and replace it with a different effect. There's also omens. These are things you keep in your inventory, and they're automatically consumed when you meet a certain requirement. This can only happen once per combat, however. So one example would be once you reach 25% life, you recover all flask charges. And again, then the omen is consumed. And then there's another item that if you use it and consume it on an item, this is going to allow you to foresee the result of the next currency item used on it. Basically, it's like a fate prognostication engine that tells you what the next craft on the item will be, so you know whether or not to waste the resource on that craft. This actually completely changed my understanding of how the seeds are determined on crafting. I thought the seed was generated on the spot when you do the craft, as opposed to being baked into the state of the item. Anyway, in short, lots of exciting stuff coming for Path of Exile. Details and everything in the links below. Again, Exilecon is still ongoing. I'm sure we're getting more juicy details revealed about all of this. I'm probably going to try to have another roundup video, maybe early next week, where we can talk more about PoE. Because for now, that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to check out last week's video, in which we discussed how Blizzard games are coming to Steam. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.